The wagon wheels groaned under the weight of her father's debt, and Alina Zimmerman knew with sickening certainty that she was about to become payment for it. She stood in the dusty yard of their failed ranch outside Petaluma, California, in the blazing heat of July 1878, watching a stranger inspect two horses like they were prize cattle at auction. Her father would not meet her eyes. He had not looked at her properly in the 3 days since he had come home drunk and tearful, telling her what he had done, what he had agreed to. The shame of it bent his shoulders forward, made him look 20 years older than his 53 years. The stranger was a merchant named Horace Dunlap, a thick-bodied man with graying whiskers and cold eyes that assessed everything in terms of profit and loss. He had loaned her father money to keep the ranch going after the drought killed half their cattle, and when payment came due, her father had nothing left to give except the 2 remaining horses, a broken-down wagon, and his 20-year-old daughter. Alina's hands trembled as she clutched the small bag containing everything she owned: 2 dresses, a comb that had been her mother's, a Bible, and a tintype photograph of her family before her mother died of cholera 6 years ago. She wore her best dress, though it was faded and patched at the elbows. Her dark hair was braided and pinned up, and she held her chin high despite the terror flooding through her veins. Dunlap finished his inspection of the horses and turned his attention to her. His gaze crawled over her like something alive, and she felt her skin prickle with revulsion. He walked closer, and she could smell whiskey and tobacco on his breath. "She looks healthy enough," he said, speaking to her father as if she were not standing right there. "Can she cook, so?" "Yes, sir," her father mumbled. "Alina is a good girl. She works hard. She will not give you any trouble." Alina wanted to scream at him to demand how he could do this, how he could trade his own flesh and blood like livestock, but she knew the answer. Desperation made monsters of ordinary men. The drought had devastated California ranchers. People were starving, losing everything. Her father had made a devil's bargain, and now the devil had come to collect. "I will expect you to earn your keep," Dunlap said, finally addressing her directly. "My last housekeeper ran off with a gambler. You will cook, clean, and do whatever else I require of you. Do you understand?" The implication in his words made her stomach turn, but she nodded. What choice did she have? Where could she go with no money, no horse, no family who wanted her? "Get in the wagon," Dunlap ordered. Alina turned to her father one last time. For a moment his eyes met hers and she saw the anguish there, the self-loathing. But it changed nothing. He had made his choice. "Goodbye, Papa," she said quietly. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. She did not wait for him to find words that would never be adequate. She climbed into the back of the wagon, settling herself on a crate among sacks of flour and tools. Dunlap climbed onto the driver's seat, snapped the reins, and the horses lurched forward. Alina did not look back as they rolled down the dirt road away from the only home she had ever known. She kept her eyes forward, watching the golden hills of California pass by, dotted with oak trees and dry grass. The sun beat down mercilessly, and dust rose in clouds behind them. They traveled for 3 hours in silence, following the rough trail north. Dunlap did not speak to her, for which she was grateful. She used the time to steel herself, to prepare for whatever lay ahead. She thought of her mother, who had been strong and kind, who had taught her that a woman could endure anything if she kept her dignity and her faith. Alina whispered a prayer, asking for strength, asking for deliverance, though she did not know what form it might take. They stopped at a creek to water the horses. Alina climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from sitting. Dunlap gestured toward the trees. "Make yourself decent if you need to. We have another 2 hours before we reach my property." She walked into the shade of the trees, grateful for a moment alone. The creek burbled over smooth stones, and she knelt beside it, splashing cool water on her face and neck. Her reflection wavered in the current, and she barely recognized herself. Just 3 days ago, she had been free. Now she belonged to a man she despised, and she had no idea how to escape this fate. When she returned to the wagon, Dunlap was checking the horse's hooves. He looked up at her approach. "You are probably wondering what your life will be like," he said. His tone was almost conversational, which somehow made it worse. "I am a reasonable man, Eleanor. I expect hard work and obedience, and in return, you will have a roof over your head and food in your belly. That is more than many people have these days." "I understand," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Good. As long as we understand each other, we will get along fine." He smiled, showing yellowed teeth, and Eleanor felt ice settle in her stomach. They climbed back into the wagon and continued north. The landscape grew hillier, more wooded. They passed a few other travelers on the road, but no one paid them any mind. Eleanor's mind raced, considering possibilities. Could she run away once they reached his property? But where would she go? She had no money, no horse, no friends or family who could take her in. She knew what happened to women alone on the frontier: starvation, violence, or worse. The sun was beginning to lower in the sky when they crested a hill, and Eleanor saw a small ranch spread out in the valley below. It was more prosperous than her father's place had been, with a solid house, a large barn, and extensive corrals. She could see cattle grazing in the distance. But before they could descend into the valley, 3 riders appeared on the road ahead, blocking their path. Dunlap pulled the horses to a stop, his hand moving to the rifle beside him. The riders approached slowly. They were cowboys, weathered and trail dusty, with guns on their hips and hard looks in their eyes. The one in the middle, riding a gray mare, appeared to be the leader. He was tall and lean, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that brushed his collar and a face made sharp by sun and wind. His eyes were an unusual pale blue, startling against his tanned skin. "Afternoon," he said, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. "That is a fine wagon and good horses you have there." "I have no business with you," Dunlap said coldly. "Move aside." The cowboy's gaze shifted to Eleanor in the back of the wagon, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or concern. His eyes lingered on her for a long moment before returning to Dunlap. "Those horses look familiar," he said. "Where did you get them?" "I purchased them legally. Now get out of my way before there is trouble." The 2 other cowboys spread out slightly, flanking their leader. The tension thickened like humidity before a storm. Eleanor's heart pounded. She did not know if these men were outlaws or simply opportunistic thieves, but she knew they were dangerous. The leader nudged his horse closer, his eyes never leaving Dunlap's face. "I am William Grant," he said. "I worked for Peter Zimmerman last summer, helped him with the cattle drive. Those are his horses, and unless I am mistaken, that is his daughter in your wagon." Eleanor's breath caught. She remembered William Grant now, though she had only seen him from a distance when he and the other hired hands had worked her father's ranch. He had been quiet and competent, the kind of man who did his job without complaint. "The horses and the girl are mine now," Dunlap said. "Zimmerman sold them to me in payment of his debt. I have a signed contract if you want to see it." William's jaw tightened. "A man cannot sell his daughter. That is not legal, no matter what paper you wave around. She came willingly. She is of age. The law will see it as a private arrangement between consenting parties." Dunlap's hand inched closer to his rifle. "Now I have been patient, but my patience is at an end. Move, or I will move you." Eleanor saw William's hand rest on the gun at his hip, saw the calculation in his eyes. The other two cowboys looked ready to draw as well. Violence was about to erupt, and she would be caught in the middle of it. "Wait," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. All eyes turned to her. "Please do not fight over this." William looked at her, really looked at her, and she saw something unexpected in those pale blue eyes. Not pity, but a kind of fierce protectiveness that made her chest tighten. "Miss Zimmerman," he said carefully, "did you agree to this arrangement of your own free will?" She hesitated. What was the truth? She had climbed into this wagon, had not fought or screamed or run, but what choice had she truly had? "My father made his decision," she said finally. "I am just trying to survive." William's expression darkened. He looked back at Dunlap with open disgust. "I will buy her contract from you." Dunlap laughed, a harsh sound. "She is not for sale to you. Name your price." "There is no price. She is mine, legally acquired, and I am keeping her. Now for the last time, move." William sat very still on his horse, and Alina could see him weighing his options. Could he shoot Dunlap and take her? Probably. But that would make him a murderer and an outlaw, hunted by the law. She did not want that blood on her conscience, did not want this stranger to sacrifice his freedom for her. "Let it be," she said quietly. "Please, just let it be." William looked at her for a long moment, and something passed between them, some wordless understanding. Then he turned to his companions. "Check his papers," he said. "If he has a legal contract, there is nothing we can do right now." One of the other cowboys, a stocky man with a red beard, looked shocked. "Will, you cannot be serious. Check the papers, Tom." Reluctantly, Dunlap produced a document from his coat. Tom rode close enough to examine it, his face twisted with distaste. Finally, he nodded to William. "It looks legal enough. Her father's signature is on it." William's hands tightened on his reins, but he nodded slowly. "All right, Dunlap. You can pass. But know this. If I hear that you have mistreated Miss Zimmerman in any way, if I hear that you have forced yourself on her or hurt her, I will come back, and no piece of paper will protect you then." Dunlap sneered. "Are you threatening me? I am making you a promise." For a moment, the two men stared at each other, and Alina could feel the violence simmering just beneath the surface. Then William reined his horse aside, and his companions reluctantly followed suit, clearing the road. As the wagon rolled past them, William caught Alina's eye one more time. "I will find a way," he said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "I promise." Then they were past, and Dunlap was urging the horses into a faster pace, as if he could outrun the threat behind them. Alina turned to look back and saw William still sitting on his horse, watching them disappear down the road. Something in her chest loosened just slightly. She did not know why this stranger had tried to help her, why he would make such a promise to someone he barely knew. But for the first time since her father had told her about the deal, she felt a small spark of hope. The ranch house was neat and well-maintained, with whitewashed walls and a covered porch. Dunlap pulled the wagon up to the front and climbed down, tying the horses. "Bring your bag and come inside," he ordered. Alina obeyed, following him through the front door into a spacious parlor. The house was nicely furnished, better than she had expected. A woman's touch was evident in the curtains and the arranged flowers, though they were wilted now, brown at the edges. "My wife died 2 years ago," Dunlap said, noticing her gaze. "Pneumonia. Since then, I have had trouble keeping help. Women around here do not want to work for a widower, and the ones I have hired either cannot cook or they run off." He showed her through the house, the kitchen with its large stove, the dining room, the sitting room, and finally upstairs to a small bedroom. "This will be yours," he said. "You will wake at dawn to prepare breakfast, and your days will be spent keeping this house in order. You will have Sunday mornings to yourself for church if you wish. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." "Good. He paused at the door, and his expression shifted into something that made her skin crawl. "I will expect you to be grateful for this opportunity, Alina. Many women would be happy to have such a situation." She did not respond, just kept her eyes lowered until he left, closing the door behind him. Only then did she allow herself to sink onto the narrow bed, her whole body shaking with the strain of holding herself together. She thought of William Grant's pale blue eyes, his fierce promise. She thought of her mother, buried in the cemetery outside Petaluma. She thought of her father, drunk and desperate and broken. Then she stood up, unpacked her small bag, and began planning her survival. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work. Alina woke before sunrise to make breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and her afternoons cooking. Dunlap watched her constantly, criticizing her work, making crude comments that he disguised as jokes. She learned to move through the house like a ghost, to make herself small and unnoticed when possible. On the 4th day, she was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard horses approaching. Her heart leaped, hoping irrationally that it might be William Grant, but it was just a neighbor coming to do business with Dunlap. She returned to her work, trying not to feel disappointed. That evening, as she was cleaning up after supper, Dunlap came into the kitchen. He had been drinking, she could smell it on him. He stood too close, backing her against the counter. "You have been here almost a week now," he said, his voice thick. "You have kept your distance, acted like you are too good for me, but you need to understand your place here, girl." Alina's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked for an escape route, but he had her trapped. "I have worked hard," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I have done everything you asked." "Not everything," he said, reaching out to touch her face. She jerked away, ducking under his arm and putting the kitchen table between them. "You said I would be your housekeeper. That is all I agreed to." "You agreed to whatever I say you agreed to," he snarled, his face darkening with anger. "You think you have rights here? You think you can say no to me?" Alina grabbed the cast iron skillet from the stove, holding it like a weapon. Her hands shook, but her voice came out hard. "Stay away from me." Dunlap looked at the skillet, then at her face, and something in her expression must have convinced him she would use it. He stepped back, his lips curling into a sneer. "You cannot stay awake forever, girl. Sooner or later you will have to sleep." He turned and walked out, leaving her trembling in the kitchen, the heavy skillet still clutched in her hands. Alina did not sleep that night. She pushed her dresser against the door and sat on her bed with a knife she had taken from the kitchen, listening to every creak and groan of the house. At dawn, exhausted and terrified, she went downstairs to make breakfast. Dunlap acted as if nothing had happened, eating his eggs and bacon while reading a newspaper. But Alina could feel the threat hanging over her like a blade. She knew it was only a matter of time. On the 6th day, she was feeding the chickens when she heard a horse in the yard. She looked up to see William Grant dismounting from his gray mare, and relief flooded through her so powerfully she nearly dropped the feed bucket. Dunlap came out of the barn, his expression immediately hostile. "What do you want, Grant?" "I came to make you an offer," William said calmly. "I am willing to trade you a wagon and 2 horses for the girl's contract." Alina froze, her heart suddenly pounding for an entirely different reason. Dunlap laughed. "I already have a wagon and horses. Why would I trade for more of the same? Because these are better quality, and because you know what I will do if you do not accept. Are you threatening me again? I am offering you a fair trade. Your wagon is nearly broken down and those horses are old. I am offering you a new wagon, barely used, and 2 strong horses that can work for another 10 years. It is a good deal, Dunlap, better than you deserve." Alina held her breath. She could see Dunlap calculating, weighing his options. His eyes flicked to her, then back to William. And if I refuse, then I will go to the sheriff and explain exactly how you acquired Miss Zimmerman. I will make sure everyone in the county knows that you are holding a woman against her will. Your reputation will be destroyed, and good luck finding anyone willing to do business with you after that. She is not being held against her will. She agreed to work for me. Did she?" William's voice was soft, dangerous. "Why do not we ask her? Miss Zimmerman, do you want to stay here, or would you prefer to be free of your contract?" Alina looked between the two men. Dunlap's face was red with fury, his hands clenched into fists. William looked calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the readiness to fight if necessary. "I want to be free," she said clearly. "There," William said. "You heard her. Now, are you going to accept my trade, or do I need to make good on my promise from the other day?" For a long moment, Dunlap said nothing. Then he spat in the dust at William's feet. "Fine, bring your wagon and horses. But I want the contract in writing that this trade is legal and binding. I will not have you coming back here claiming I stole from you." "Agreed. I will return in 2 hours with the wagon, the horses, and a written contract. Miss Zimmerman will be ready to leave." William swung back onto his mare and rode away without another word. Alina watched him go, her entire body trembling with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Could it really be this simple? Could she really be free? Dunlap rounded on her, his face twisted with rage. "Get inside and pack your things. And do not think for 1 second that Cowboy is some kind of hero. He will expect the same things from you that I did. Men are all the same, girl. You will figure that out soon enough." Alina did not argue. She went inside, gathered her few belongings, and waited in her room, listening to Dunlap storm around downstairs, cursing and breaking things. She did not care. In 2 hours she would be away from here. That was all that mattered. When William returned, he had the wagon and horses as promised, along with Tom and the third cowboy from the road. They also brought a man in a dark suit, who introduced himself as a clerk from the land office. He had drawn up a contract transferring Alina's previous agreement to this new trade, nullifying Dunlap's claim on her. Dunlap read it carefully, his face sour, but finally signed. William signed as well, then handed Dunlap the reins to the wagon and horses. "The trade is complete," the clerk announced. "Miss Zimmerman is free of her previous contract." Alina climbed down from the porch with her bag. She could feel Dunlap's eyes burning into her back, but she did not look at him. She kept her gaze on William, who was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Miss Zimmerman," he said quietly, "you are free to go wherever you wish. If you need help getting to another town or finding work, I will assist you in any way I can. You owe me nothing." Alina stared at him, not quite believing what she had heard. "I am free, truly free, truly free. The contract has been dissolved. You are not bound to anyone." She felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Where will I go? That is entirely your choice. But if you need time to figure it out, my family has a ranch about 10 miles from here. My mother and sister live there. They would be happy to have you stay with them while you decide what you want to do. There is no obligation, no strings attached, just an offer of hospitality." Alina looked at this man who had traded a wagon and 2 good horses for her freedom, who was now offering her shelter without asking anything in return. She thought of her father, who had traded her away. She thought of Dunlap, who had seen her as property to use and discard. And she thought of William Grant, who had called her Miss Zimmerman with respect in his voice, who had given her back her freedom. "I would like that," she said quietly. "Thank you." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face, making him look younger and infinitely less dangerous. "Then let us go home." He helped her onto his horse, settling her behind him, and they rode away from Dunlap's ranch. Alina did not look back, not once. She kept her arms lightly around William's waist, feeling the warmth of him through his shirt, and watched the golden California hills roll by. Tom and the other cowboy, whose name was James, rode alongside them, chatting easily about ranch business. Alina learned that William's family owned a large cattle ranch, that he had 3 brothers and 1 sister, and that his father had died the previous winter. "Will has been running things since then," Tom said. "Doing a good job of it, too. The old man would be proud." "My father knew what he was doing," William said quietly. "I am just trying not to ruin what he built." They rode for nearly 2 hours, following a well-worn trail through rolling hills dotted with cattle. Finally, they crested a rise and Alina saw the ranch spread out below, much larger than either her father's place or Dunlap's. The main house was a sprawling structure of wood and stone, with several outbuildings and extensive corrals. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she could see people moving around the yard. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50 years old, with gray-streaked brown hair and a kind face. Behind her came a young woman about Alina's age, with William's same blue eyes and dark hair. "William," the older woman called, "what have you brought home this time?" William dismounted and helped Alina down. "Mother Rachel, this is Miss Alina Zimmerman. She needs a place to stay for a while. I told her you would not mind." His mother looked Alina over with sharp, assessing eyes, but her expression was warm. "Of course we do not mind. Any friend of William's is welcome here." "I am Martha Grant, and this is my daughter Rachel." "Thank you, Mrs. Grant," Alina said. "I do not want to be a burden. I can work for my keep." "We will sort all that out later," Martha said briskly. "Right now you look exhausted. Rachel, take Miss Zimmerman inside and show her to the guest room. Let her rest before supper." Rachel smiled and took Alina's bag. "Come on, I will show you around." As Alina followed her into the house, she glanced back at William. He was talking quietly with his mother, and Alina wondered what he was telling her, how he was explaining this situation. But she was too tired to worry about it. For the first time in days, she felt safe. The guest room was small but comfortable, with a real bed and clean quilts. Rachel helped her settle in, chattering pleasantly about the ranch and her family. Alina learned that Rachel was 19, that there were indeed 3 other brothers, all working various parts of the ranch, and that Martha Grant ran the household with an iron will tempered by genuine kindness. "You will like it here," Rachel said confidently. "William is gruff sometimes, but he has a good heart. If he brought you home, it means he thinks you are worth looking after. He does not do things like that for just anyone." Alina did not know how to respond to that, so she just nodded. After Rachel left, she lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a moment. She fell asleep almost instantly, more deeply than she had slept in weeks. When she woke, the sun was setting, painting the room in shades of gold and orange. She could hear voices and laughter from downstairs, the sounds of a family sharing a meal. For a moment, she just lay there, listening, remembering what it had been like before her mother died, when her own family had been whole and happy. Then she got up, smoothed her dress, and went downstairs. The dining room was full of people. Martha sat at the head of the table with Rachel beside her. William sat across from his sister, and 3 other men, clearly his brothers, filled the remaining seats. They all looked up when Alina appeared in the doorway. "Miss Zimmerman," Martha said warmly, "please join us. You must be starving. Boys, make room." One of the brothers, a younger version of William with the same lean build and blue eyes, immediately stood and pulled out a chair for her. "I am Daniel," he said with a friendly grin. "Welcome to the chaos." The other brothers introduced themselves as well. Matthew, the eldest, who was perhaps 30 and had a serious, responsible air about him, and Samuel, who was clearly the youngest at maybe 22 and had a quick smile and mischievous eyes. Alina found herself seated between Daniel and Rachel, with William directly across from her. Martha heaped food onto her plate with cheerful authority. Roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, beans, and greens from the garden. It was more food than Alina had seen in weeks, and she felt tears prick her eyes at the simple kindness of it. "Eat up," Martha said gently. "You look like you need it." Alina did eat, trying not to seem too desperate, though she was ravenous. The conversation flowed around her, the Grant family discussing the day's work, problems with the cattle, plans for the upcoming week. They included her naturally, asking her opinion on small things, making her feel like a guest rather than an intruder. After dinner, while Martha and Rachel cleaned up, despite Alina's offers to help, William asked if she would take a walk with him. They strolled out to the porch and then down toward the corrals, where the last light was fading from the sky. "I wanted to make sure you understand the situation," William said after a moment of silence. "You are free to stay here as long as you need. There is no pressure, no expectation. My mother genuinely enjoys having company, and Rachel could use a friend her own age. But if you want to leave to go somewhere else, I will help you do that too." "Why did you help me?" Alina asked quietly. "You spent a wagon and 2 horses on a stranger. That is not a small thing." William was quiet for a long moment, leaning against the corral fence and looking out at the darkening hills. "My father used to say that a man's character is defined by what he does when no one is watching, when there is no reward for doing the right thing. I saw you in that wagon with Dunlap, and I knew what kind of man he was. I knew what he would do to you if no one intervened." He turned to look at her, his pale eyes serious in the gathering dusk. "I worked for your father last year. He was a good man back then, before the drought broke him. I saw how he treated you from a distance, saw that he cared about you. I cannot imagine what desperation drove him to make the choice he made, but I knew I could not let it stand. Not if there was something I could do about it. Your wagon and horses were worth far more than Dunlap paid for me," Alina said. "Then I made a good trade," William said simply. "You are worth far more than any wagon or horses." Alina felt warmth spread through her chest, a feeling she barely recognized after so much fear and despair. "I do not know how to repay you." "You do not have to repay me. That is what I am trying to tell you. You owe me nothing. You are free, Alina, completely and utterly free to make your own choices." She looked at him, this man who had saved her without asking anything in return, and felt something shift inside her. She had spent the past weeks seeing men as enemies, as threats. But William Grant was different. He had given her back her freedom, and that was the most precious gift anyone had ever offered her. "I would like to stay for a while," she said. "If your mother truly does not mind, I need time to figure out what comes next." "Stay as long as you like," William said. He smiled, that same transforming smile from earlier. "Besides, Rachel will be thrilled. She has been complaining for months that she has no one to talk to except her brothers, and we are apparently terrible conversationalists." Alina laughed, surprising herself. It had been so long since she had laughed that the sound felt foreign. But it also felt good, like something tight inside her was beginning to loosen. They walked back to the house together, and Alina felt the night air cool on her skin, smelled the sage and dust and distant cattle. She thought about her father, about Dunlap, about all the fear and pain of the past weeks. But she also thought about William's kindness, about Martha's warm welcome, about the possibility of a future that was not defined by what had been done to her. For the first time since her mother died, Alina allowed herself to hope. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Alina helped Martha with the household work, not because she had to, but because she wanted to contribute. She cooked and cleaned and did laundry alongside Rachel, and the two young women quickly became friends. Rachel was bright and funny, full of stories about growing up with four brothers and dreams of someday traveling to San Francisco. Eleanor also learned the rhythms of ranch life. She watched the cowboys bring in cattle from the far pastures, helped Martha preserve vegetables from the garden, and listened to the Grant brothers discuss plans for expanding their herd. It was hard work, but honest work, and she found satisfaction in it. William was often away during the day, riding the property lines or dealing with cattle business, but in the evenings he would join the family for supper. Eleanor found herself watching for him, noticing when he rode in dusty and tired, seeing how his face would relax when he stepped into the house, and the weight of responsibility slid off his shoulders for a few hours. He was always respectful toward her, never pushing or presuming, but she caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she could not quite read. And she found herself watching him too, noticing the way he was patient with his younger brothers, the way he listened carefully when people spoke, the way he handled horses with gentle confidence. One evening, about a month after she had arrived, Eleanor was sitting on the porch with Rachel, mending clothes in the last light of the day. The men were still out with the cattle, and Martha had gone to visit a neighboring ranch to help with a birth. "You like my brother," Rachel said suddenly, her tone teasing but kind. Eleanor felt her cheeks heat. "I am grateful to him. He saved my life." "That is not what I mean, and you know it." Rachel set down her sewing and looked at Eleanor seriously. "You watch him the way he watches you. Like you are both trying to figure something out." "Rachel, I cannot. He saved me from being forced into one arrangement. I will not immediately throw myself at him just because he was kind." "That is not what I am suggesting," Rachel said. "But Eleanor, you have been here over a month now. You are safe. You are free. Maybe it is time to let yourself feel something other than gratitude." Eleanor did not respond, but Rachel's words stayed with her. That night, she lay in bed and allowed herself to really think about William Grant. He was handsome, certainly, in that weathered cowboy way. But more than that, he was kind. He was steady. He treated her like a person, not property. He made her feel safe. And yes, when he smiled at her across the dinner table, when their hands accidentally brushed as they reached for the same dish, when he asked her opinion on some small ranch matter, she felt something warm and bright kindle in her chest. But she was also terrified. She had just escaped one man who wanted to control her. How could she trust her own feelings so soon? How could she know if what she felt was real or just gratitude and relief? The next day, William asked if she would ride out with him to check on a sick calf in one of the far pastures. Eleanor agreed, and they saddled horses together in the cool morning air. She had learned to ride as a child, and it felt good to be back on horseback, riding through the golden hills under the endless blue sky. They found the calf with its mother, and William examined it carefully, checking for signs of infection or injury. Eleanor watched him work, admiring his competence, the gentle way he handled the frightened animal. "He will be fine," William said finally, straightening up. "Just a small scrape that needs watching. His mother will take care of him." They remounted and rode on, following a creek up into the hills. The water sparkled in the sunlight and wildflowers dotted the grass. It was beautiful, peaceful, and Eleanor felt something in her soul settle. "Can I ask you something?" William said after a while. "Of course." "What do you want, Eleanor? For your future, I mean. Do you want to stay in California? Do you want to return to your father? Do you want to find work somewhere else?" Eleanor considered the question carefully. "I do not want to return to my father. What he did, the choice he made that broke something between us that I do not think can be repaired. As for the rest, I honestly do not know. A month ago, I was just trying to survive. Now I have the luxury of thinking about what I actually want, and I am not sure I know how to do that." "That is fair," William said. "But if you could have anything, if there were no obstacles or limitations, what would you choose?" Elinor thought about it, really thought about it. What did she want? Not just safety, not just survival, but genuine happiness. "What would that look like?" "I want a home," she said slowly. "Not just a house, but a real home with people who care about me. I want to wake up in the morning without fear. I want to laugh and make plans and believe that the future might be good." She paused, then added quietly, "I want to be loved for who I am, not for what I can provide." William reined his horse to a stop, and Elinor did the same. They sat there on their horses beside the creek, looking at each other in the bright sunlight. "You deserve all of that," William said, his voice rough with emotion. "You deserve happiness and safety and love, and I hope you find it." Something in his tone made Elinor's heart skip. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw more than just kindness in his eyes. She saw longing, carefully controlled but unmistakable. "William," she said carefully, "why did you really trade for my freedom?" He looked away, out at the hills, and she could see him struggling with something. Finally, he spoke. "I told you the truth. I could not stand by and let Dunlap keep you, but there was more to it than that." He turned back to her, and his pale eyes were intense. "When I worked for your father last summer, I saw you around the ranch. You were always kind to the hired hands, always had a smile and a kind word. One day, you brought water out to us when we were working in the heat, and you talked to me about the cattle, asked intelligent questions about the ranch. Most people look through cowboys like we are invisible, but you saw me." He took a breath, his hands tight on the reins. "I thought about you after that summer ended, wondered how you were doing. When I saw you in Dunlap's wagon, I knew I had to do something. But it was not just about doing the right thing. It was about you specifically, because I cared what happened to you." Elinor's breath caught. "You barely knew me, I know, and I am not asking for anything. You have been through hell, and the last thing you need is another man making demands on you. But you asked why I did it, and that is the honest answer. I did it because the thought of you being hurt, being trapped with a man like Dunlap, was intolerable to me." Elinor felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not sad tears. They were tears of relief, of recognition, of something opening inside her that had been closed for so long. "I am glad it was you," she said quietly. "I am glad you were the one who found me. Because I think if it had been anyone else, I would not have believed I could trust again. But you have been so patient, so kind, never pushing or demanding. You gave me my freedom, and in doing that, you gave me the space to discover that what I want, what I truly want, is to stay here. With you." William stared at her, and she could see hope and disbelief warring in his expression. "Elinor, you do not have to say that. You do not owe me anything." "I know I do not owe you. That is why I am saying it, not out of obligation, but because it is true." She urged her horse closer to his until they were side by side. "I am still figuring out who I am now after everything that happened, but I know that when I think about the future, about what happiness might look like, you are in it, if you want to be." William reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip gentle but firm. "I want to be," he said. "More than anything. But Elinor, I need you to be sure. I need you to know that you are choosing this, choosing me, because it is what you truly want. Not because you feel obligated, not because you are grateful, but because you genuinely want a life with me." "I am sure," Elinor said, and she was. This was not the desperate gratitude of the first days, not the relief of escape. This was something real and solid, built on a foundation of respect and growing affection. I am not saying I am ready for everything right away. I still have healing to do. But I want to do that healing here with you and your family, and I want to see where this leads." William smiled, that transforming smile that made her heart flutter. "Then we will take it as slow as you need. There is no rush. We have time." They sat there on their horses, hands clasped, and Alina felt peace settle over her like a blessing. This was not the end of her healing, not the instant fixing of everything that had broken inside her. But it was a beginning, and that was enough. Over the following months, Alina and William's relationship deepened slowly, carefully, like a plant taking root in good soil. They went on rides together, worked side by side on ranch tasks, sat together in the evenings talking about everything and nothing. William courted her properly, with respect and patience, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. Martha and Rachel watched with approval, and even William's brothers accepted Alina as part of the family. She learned the ranch business, proved herself capable and intelligent, and earned the respect of the hired hands. She was not just the woman William had saved anymore. She was Alina Zimmerman, a person in her own right, with her own value and her own dreams. 6 months after William had traded for her freedom, he proposed properly, going down on one knee in the barn while she was helping him with the evening feeding. He had a simple gold ring that had been his grandmother's, and his hands shook as he held it out to her. "Alina Zimmerman, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because you owe me, not because you are grateful, but because you want to build a life together. Because I love you, and I want to spend every day proving that you made the right choice in choosing me." Alina looked at this good man, this patient, kind, honorable man who had given her back her freedom and then waited for her to freely choose him, and her answer came without hesitation. "Yes, William Grant, I will marry you. Because I love you too, and because a life with you is exactly what I want." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. They kissed there in the barn, with the horses watching curiously and the evening light slanting through the cracks in the walls, and Alina felt joy so pure it almost hurt. They were married in early October of 1879, in a small church in Petaluma with Martha, Rachel, and William's brothers in attendance. Alina wore a new dress that Rachel and Martha had helped her sew, and William wore his best suit and looked so handsome he took her breath away. Her father did not come. Alina had sent him an invitation, partly out of obligation and partly because some small part of her still hoped he might apologize, might try to make things right. But he did not respond, and eventually she accepted that he had made his choice, just as she had made hers. She refused to let his absence mar her happiness. As she spoke her vows in front of God and witnesses, promising to love and honor William Grant for the rest of her life, she meant every word with her whole heart. The ranch became her home in truth as well as name. She and William moved into a small house on the property that Matthew had been living in, and Matthew moved into the main house to help Martha. Alina threw herself into making their house a real home, hanging curtains, planting a garden, learning to cook William's favorite meals. Their life together was not always easy. Running a ranch was hard work, with long hours and unpredictable challenges. There were droughts and sick cattle, disagreements with neighbors over land and water rights, and the constant threat of rustlers or wild animals. But they faced it all together, partners in every sense of the word. William was everything Alina had hoped for and more. He was patient and passionate, tender and strong, a man who valued her opinions and respected her capabilities. He never raised his hand to her, never spoke to her with disrespect, never made her feel like anything less than his equal. The fears she had carried, the wounds Dunlap had inflicted with his words and threats, slowly healed under William's steady love. Their physical relationship unfolded naturally, at Alina's pace. William was patient, letting her set the boundaries, showing her that intimacy could be about love and connection rather than power and control. On their wedding night, he held her and told her they had all the time in the world, that there was no rush. And when they finally came together fully, it was beautiful and right, everything she had been afraid she would never be able to experience. The first year of their marriage was a time of discovery and growth. Alina learned the rhythms of being a wife, of managing a household and supporting her husband's work. But she also carved out her own place on the ranch, proving she could do far more than cook and clean. She learned to keep the ranch books, her neat handwriting and careful arithmetic proving invaluable. She learned animal husbandry, could birth a calf or treat a sick horse as well as any of the men. She earned the respect of the hired hands not because she was the boss's wife, but because she was competent and fair. In the spring of 1880, Alina discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mixture of joy and fear. She wanted children, wanted to build a family with William, but pregnancy was dangerous. Her own mother had survived Alina's birth only to die from cholera years later, but Alina had heard enough stories of women who died in childbirth to be nervous. William was overjoyed but also worried, hovering over her with protective concern. Martha and Rachel rallied around her with practical advice and emotional support. The whole family prepared for the new addition with excitement. Alina's pregnancy was relatively easy, though she tired quickly in the heat of summer. William insisted she rest more, and his brothers picked up extra work to give him time to be with her. On a cold night in December, with Martha and a midwife from town in attendance, Alina gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Peter, after her father, an act of forgiveness that Alina had not known she was ready for until she held her son in her arms and realized she wanted to honor the good man her father had been before desperation had broken him. William held his son with tears streaming down his face, promising to be the kind of father the boy deserved, to protect him and guide him and love him unconditionally. Motherhood transformed Alina in ways she had not expected. Holding Peter, nursing him, watching him grow and change every day, filled her with a fierce protective love that eclipsed everything else. She understood her father a little better now, understood how fear for your child's survival could drive you to terrible choices. She did not forgive what he had done, but she understood it, and that understanding brought its own kind of peace. She wrote to her father, telling him about his grandson, including a photograph. She did not receive a response, and she did not expect one. But she had reached out, had offered the olive branch, and that was enough. Life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. Alina and William were exhausted but happy, navigating the challenges of parenthood together. Peter was a good baby, healthy and curious, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. The whole Grant family doted on him, and he grew up surrounded by love and laughter. 2 years later, in 1882, Alina gave birth to a daughter they named Martha Rose, after William's mother, and because Alina loved roses. Little Martha was as different from Peter as could be, tiny and delicate where he had been robust, quiet where he had been vocal. Alina loved them both with an intensity that sometimes overwhelmed her. The ranch continued to prosper. William expanded the herd, purchased more land, and built a reputation as a fair and honest businessman. Alina's management of the books proved crucial, her careful accounting catching problems before they became crises. They were partners in every sense, building something solid and lasting together. In 1884, when Alina was 26 and William was 30, They took their children to the state fair in Sacramento. It was a grand adventure. Peter at 4 years old, wide-eyed with excitement, and Martha toddling along holding her father's hand. They saw agricultural exhibits, horse races, and even a demonstration of a new piece of farm equipment that William thought might be useful for the ranch. As they walked through the fairgrounds, Alina stopped at a booth selling tintype photographs. She wanted to capture this moment, this happiness, to preserve it for always. The photographer arranged them carefully. William standing tall and proud, Alina seated beside him with Martha in her lap, Peter standing in front of his father. They all looked at the camera, and Alina thought about how far she had come from that terrified girl in Dunlap's wagon. That night, lying in their hotel room with the children asleep between them, Alina whispered to William, "I am happy. Truly, deeply happy. I never thought I would feel this way." William kissed her forehead. "You deserve every moment of happiness, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." "We built this together," Alina said. "This family, this life, it is ours." "It is ours," William agreed. "And I would not change a single moment of it." The years flowed by like water, bringing changes and challenges, but also deep contentment. Martha Grant, William's mother, passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1886, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her loss was deeply felt, but Alina treasured the time they had had together, the wisdom Martha had shared, the unconditional love she had shown. Rachel married a rancher from a neighboring property in 1887, and Alina stood up as her maid of honor, their friendship having deepened into sisterhood over the years. William's brothers all eventually married as well, and the Grant family expanded, full of children and laughter and the sometimes chaotic joy of a large extended family. In 1889, Alina gave birth to twin boys, Samuel and Daniel, named after William's younger brothers. The pregnancy had been difficult, and the birth nearly killed her. William sat by her bedside for 3 days while she recovered, holding her hand, praying, refusing to leave even to sleep. When she finally opened her eyes and smiled at him, he broke down and wept with relief. After the twins, the doctor advised that another pregnancy would be too dangerous, and Alina and William accepted this news with mixed feelings. They had 4 healthy children, which was more than many couples could claim, and Alina's life was too precious to risk. William told her that she had already given him more than he had ever dreamed possible, that 4 children were a blessing beyond measure. Peter grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Martha, called Maddie by the family, was gentle and artistic, always drawing pictures of horses and mountains. The twins were wild and mischievous, keeping Alina and William on their toes but filling the house with laughter. In the mid-1890s, as Peter approached his teenage years, Alina's father appeared at the ranch unannounced. He was an old man now, bent and gray, with the look of someone who had been worn down by life. He stood at the gate, hat in hand, looking up at the house with fear and hope mingled in his eyes. Alina saw him from the kitchen window, and her first instinct was to turn away, to refuse to engage. But William came up behind her, saw where she was looking, and said quietly, "It is your choice. Whatever you decide, I will support you." Alina thought of Peter, her sweet, serious boy who carried her father's name. She thought of forgiveness, of how carrying anger only hurt the person holding it. She thought of how far she had come, how strong she had become, and realized that her father could not hurt her anymore. She had built a life that he could not touch, surrounded herself with people who truly loved her. She went out to meet him. They stood on opposite sides of the gate for a long moment, looking at each other. Her father's eyes filled with tears. "Alina," he said, his voice cracked and old. "I know I have no right to be here. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I wanted before I die to tell you how sorry I am. To tell you that not a day has passed that I have not regretted my choice. I was desperate and weak, and I failed you in the worst way a father can fail his child." Alina felt tears on her own cheeks, but her voice was steady. "Why did you come now, after all these years?" "I have been sick," he said simply. "The doctor says I do not have long, and I could not die without trying to make amends, even though I know it is too late." Alina could have turned him away. She had every right to. But she thought of her children, of the grandfather they had never known, and she thought of Mercy. "Come inside," she said, opening the gate. "Meet your grandchildren." Her father's face crumpled with gratitude and relief. He followed her into the house where William and the children waited. Alina introduced him to Peter, explaining that he carried his grandfather's name, and watched her father break down completely, holding his namesake and crying. Her father stayed for 3 days, and in that time, he and Alina talked. He told her about the drought, the desperation, the drinking that had clouded his judgment. He told her that after she left, he had sold the ranch and worked odd jobs, drinking away most of what he earned until one day he woke up and realized he had thrown away everything that mattered. He had gotten sober, found work as a ranch hand, and tried to rebuild some kind of life. But the guilt had eaten at him, and he knew he could not die without at least trying to apologize. Alina listened, and while she could not erase the past, she found she could forgive. Not because what he had done was acceptable, but because holding on to anger was too exhausting, and because she had built a life so full of love that there was room for mercy. When her father left, she hugged him, and he held her like he had when she was a little girl, before her mother died, before the world had broken him. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for letting me see who you became. You are so strong, Alina, so much stronger than your old father ever was." "I am strong because I had to be," Alina said, "but also because I found people who helped me be strong, who loved me when I could not love myself." She watched him ride away, knowing it was likely the last time she would see him. He died 4 months later, and a lawyer informed her that he had left her a small sum of money he had saved. It was not much, but Alina used it to start a fund for her children's education, a way of turning something painful into something hopeful. The years continued to pass. Peter grew into a fine young man, as tall as his father and just as honorable. At 19, he married a rancher's daughter and took over a portion of the Grant Ranch to manage himself, building his own house and starting his own family. Maddie became a talented artist, eventually moving to San Francisco to study painting, though she came home often. The twins were different from each other, despite being born together. Samuel wanted to see the world beyond California, while Daniel was content on the ranch. Alina and William grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies wearing down from years of hard work. But their love remained strong, deepening with time into something unshakable. They still went on rides together when they could, still sat on the porch in the evenings talking, still reached for each other in the night. In the early 1900s, as a new century dawned, Alina and William celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary. Their children, some with families of their own, gathered at the ranch for a party. As Alina looked around at the people filling her home, at the grandchildren playing in the yard, at William watching her with love and pride in his eyes, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That evening, when the guests had gone and they were alone, William took her hand and led her out to the barn, to the place where he had proposed all those years ago. "Do you remember?" he asked. "I remember everything," Alina said. "I remember being terrified, and I remember you giving me the freedom to choose. I remember falling in love slowly, carefully, learning to trust again. And I remember every moment since. I would not change any of it, William said. Every challenge, every hardship, it was all worth it to build this life with you. We were blessed, Alina said. We found each other at exactly the right moment. You saved me, William, but not just from Dunlap. You saved me from giving up on myself, on the possibility of happiness. You saved me too, William said. Before you, I was just going through the motions, running the ranch because it was what was expected. But you gave me purpose beyond work. You gave me love and family and a reason to build something lasting. They stood together in the barn, holding each other, and Alina thought about the girl she had been, standing in a dusty yard being traded for a wagon and horses. She thought about the terror and despair, the sense that her life was over before it had truly begun. And then she thought about everything that had come after. William giving her freedom, her choice to stay, their courtship and marriage, their children and grandchildren, the ranch they had built together, the love that had sustained them through everything. I made the right choice, Alina said. When you set me free, I chose to stay, and it was the best decision I ever made. I am grateful every day that you chose me, William said, that you saw something in me worth staying for. As the years moved into the 1910s, Alina and William settled into a comfortable routine, no longer running the ranch themselves, but still involved in its management. Peter and Daniel handled most of the day-to-day operations, and the ranch continued to prosper under their leadership. Maddie came home from San Francisco in 1912, her art career thriving, for an extended visit, and Samuel returned from his travels around the world with stories that kept the whole family enthralled for hours. In 1915, at the age of 57, Alina became a great-grandmother when Peter's eldest daughter gave birth to a baby girl. Holding that tiny infant, Alina marveled at the way life cycled forward, how one generation gave way to the next, how love multiplied rather than divided. William, now 62, had slowed down considerably. His body ached from decades of ranch work, and his hair had gone completely white. But his eyes still lit up when he looked at Alina, and his hand still reached for hers whenever they sat together. They talked often about their life, remembering the early days, laughing at old stories, marveling at how far they had come. William never tired of reminding Alina that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him, that trading a wagon and 2 horses for her freedom was the smartest deal he had ever made. I got far more than I gave, he would say. I gave up some property and got a whole lifetime of love in return. In the autumn of 1918, William fell ill with pneumonia. Alina nursed him through it, sitting by his bedside day and night, refusing to leave even when their children begged her to rest. She held his hand and talked to him about their life together, reminding him of their wedding day, of the births of their children, of every beautiful moment they had shared. William recovered, but he was never quite as strong afterward. He and Alina spent their days sitting on the porch together, watching the ranch carry on without them, secure in the knowledge that they had built something that would outlast them both. One spring evening in 1921, as the sun set over the California hills, William and Alina sat together on their porch, holding hands as they had done for over 40 years. The air was warm and sweet with the scent of wildflowers, and they could hear their grandchildren playing in the distance. "Do you remember the day I found you in Dunlap's wagon?" William asked, his voice soft with age. "I remember," Alina said. "I thought my life was over. I thought I had no future, no hope. And now look at all of this." William gestured at the ranch, at the house, at the life they had built. "Look at what came from that terrible moment. You gave me the freedom to choose," Alina said, And I chose this life every single day. I never regretted it, not even once. William squeezed her hand. I love you, Alina Grant. I have loved you from the moment I saw you in that wagon, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Alina said, leaning her head against his shoulder. You saved me, and then you helped me save myself. You gave me a life beyond anything I ever dreamed possible. They sat there as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and Alina felt peace settle over her like a benediction. She had been traded for a wagon and 2 horses, had been seen as property, as something to be used and discarded. But William had set her free, had given her back her agency and her dignity. And she had chosen to stay, had chosen to build a life with him, and that choice had made all the difference. Their children and grandchildren surrounded them as the years passed, a testament to the love that had started with one man's simple act of human decency. Alina and William grew very old together, their bodies failing but their spirits strong, their love undiminished by time. When William passed away peacefully in his sleep in the summer of 1925, at the age of 72, Alina mourned him deeply but without regret. They had had 46 years together, had built a family and a legacy, had loved each other completely. She missed him terribly, missed his steady presence, his gentle humor, his unwavering support. But she was grateful for every moment they had shared. Alina lived another 8 years, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She spent her days tending her garden, painting with Maddie when she visited, and telling stories about William and their life together. She made sure the younger generations understood what their grandfather had done, how he had saved her, and then given her the freedom to choose her own path. She talked about how he had courted her patiently, never pushing, always respecting her boundaries. She talked about their wedding day, about the births of their children, about the way they had worked side by side to build something lasting. She wanted them to understand that love was not just feeling but action, not just romance but partnership. On a warm day in October 1933, Alina Zimmerman Grant passed away quietly in her sleep, surrounded by photographs of William and their family. She was 75 years old and had lived a full, rich life far beyond anything she could have imagined that terrible day when her father traded her away. At her funeral, her children and grandchildren spoke of her strength, her kindness, her unwavering love for their father and for all of them. They talked about how she had overcome terrible circumstances to build a beautiful life, how she had chosen love over bitterness, hope over despair. Peter, now 53 and a grandfather himself, stood at her graveside and told the story of how his parents had met, how his father had traded a wagon and 2 horses for his mother's freedom, how she had chosen to stay, and how that choice had created everything they all now had. Our mother taught us that we always have choices, Peter said, his voice thick with emotion. Even in the darkest moments, even when it seems like everything has been decided for us, we can choose how we respond. She chose hope. She chose love. And she chose our father every single day of their life together. That choice made her happy, and it made him happy, and it gave all of us this family. Alina was buried beside William on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. 2 headstones stood side by side, marking the resting places of 2 people who had loved each other deeply and had built a legacy that would last for generations. The ranch continued to prosper under the management of their descendants, who never forgot the story of how it all began. The tale of Alina and William became family legend, passed down to each new generation. The story of a woman who had been traded like property, a man who had given her freedom, and the choice she had made to stay and build a life with him. It was a story about love and redemption, about dignity and choice, about how one act of kindness could change everything. It was a story about the American West, about the hard lives people lived, and the ways they found to create beauty and meaning despite the harshness. But most of all, it was a story about two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and had chosen, every single day, to build something beautiful together. And in the end, that choice had made all the difference. The sun set over the California hills as it had done for thousands of years, and would continue to do for thousands more, casting golden light over the ranch where Alina and William had lived and loved and raised their family. And though they were gone, their legacy remained, a testament to the power of love, freedom, and the simple choice to stay when you could have walked away.